Louis Hale, running from his own demons, seeks shelter in an abandoned train car in a junkyard. As the wind cuts through the place with an almost unearthly sound, he discovers he is not alone. The unsettling silence is broken by whispers that seem to emanate from the corroded metal walls. Every step Louis takes resonates like a scream in the confined space, and the feeling of being watched grows more and more intense. Exhausted and desperate for rest, he tries to ignore the strange noises, attributing them to his fatigued imagination. The walls of the carriage are covered in graffiti, traces of previous visitors or perhaps permanent residents of that metal refuge. The inscriptions are diverse, from declarations of love to messages that seem like warnings. In the midst of these, one sentence stands out, written in a shaky and desperate way. He listens. Don't cry. These words send chills down Louis' spine, and he begins to feel an oppressive presence in the air, as if the past of that place was still very much alive and watching his every move. With the darkness thickening, Louis decides to explore the carriage in search of any clues that could explain the feeling of restlessness that surrounds him. His heart beats fast as he scans the room, illuminating corners with the dim light of his cell phone. The floor is uneven, covered in debris and small objects that were left behind. Among these, he finds an old diary with moldy pages, its contents revealing the harrowing story of someone who, like him, sought refuge there but never left. While leafing through the diary, Louis discovers accounts of sleepless nights, unexplained noises, and the constant feeling of being chased by something that never fully revealed itself. The last few entries are frantic, with scribbled words that speak of an evil presence and warnings for the next visitor to flee before it's too late. Fear settles deep within Louis, but curiosity drives him to continue his exploration, even though every shadow now seems to hide a threat. Determined not to succumb to terror, Louis decides to spend the night in the carriage, defying the entity that supposedly inhabits the place. He finds a corner to settle in, surrounded by his few belongings that now seem more like protections against the unknown. As the wind continues to whistle through the cracks, bringing with it the biting cold of the night, Louis huddles in his coat, trying to find some comfort in the insulation he chose. However, as the night progresses, the whispers and discreet footsteps intensify, making palpable the presence that until then he had only felt. Now there is no doubt, something is there with him. Exploring the dark interior of the train car, Louis finds old graffiti with disturbing messages and names. He listens. Don't cry. Between the rust and the metallic smell, something more sinister permeates the air. The walls of the carriage are covered in inscriptions made by trembling hands, highlighting the desperation of those who passed by. The words seem to whisper stories of fear and suffering, and Louis feels an involuntary connection to these strangers who left their fears etched into that cold metal. When he touches the inscriptions, a cold sensation runs down his spine, as if he is directly touching the souls trapped there. Each name engraved on the wall tells an unfinished story, an interrupted destiny. Louis runs his fingers over dates and symbols that seem to mark events of disturbing significance. In a corner, a pile of small candles, now melted and covered in dust, indicates that someone tried to perform some type of ritual or tribute. The objects left behind are time capsules, speaking of terror and attempts to appease entities that perhaps inhabited that train car. The air becomes heavier, charged with a history that wants to be forgotten. The smell of metal, mixed with a sweet odor of decay, makes the atmosphere almost unbearable. Louis, driven by morbid curiosity, searches for more clues that could give him an understanding of what happened in that place. He discovers a torn piece of newspaper with reports of missing people in the area, many of whom have never been found. The connection between the disappearances and the names on the train car becomes a horrifying possibility that lodges itself in his mind. As he delves deeper into the graffiti investigation, Louis notices that some names are repeated several times, like a mantra or a warning. "They didn't let us out," he reads in an area covered in rust. That particular message makes him stop, the weight of the reality of those words hitting him deeply. He begins to realize that perhaps the wagon was not just a refuge, but a trap for those, like him, who were running away from something. The idea that he too could become just another name on the wall fills him with growing anxiety. Dedicated to fully understanding the history hidden inside that train car, Louis decides to document every inscription and object found. He takes photos with his cell phone, although the low light makes it difficult to clearly capture the details. Their plan is to gather enough information to perhaps bring some peace to the souls that still seem to reside there, or at least share their stories so they are not forgotten. As the night progresses, however, the cold intensifies, and the whispers seem to become clear voices, calling him by name, dragging him deeper into the mystery that is that Wagon of Lamentations. As he settles in, Louis notices deep marks in the metal, similar to fingernail scratches. The discovery gives him a shiver, as these marks do not appear to have been made by any tool, but by desperate hands trying to escape. He follows the trail of scratches that run down the walls and across the floor, each line a silent testament to panic and struggle. The sound of his breathing echoes in the carriage as he tries to imagine the circumstances that forced someone to mark the cold metal so brutally. Nearby, Louis discovers a collection of Polaroids scattered across the floor. The photos show terrified faces, wide eyes fixed on unseen terror. Each Polaroid is marked with different dates, and he notes with increasing uneasiness that the dates appear recent. The dim light of your cell phone illuminates expressions frozen in time, and a sense of urgency washes over you. There's one photo that makes him freeze completely, an image of you looking directly into the camera with today's date. Your heart beats wildly as you realize the meaning. Trying to remain calm, Louis takes a closer look at the scratches and the photos. He begins to connect the events recorded on the Polaroids with the marks of despair on the carriage. A dark theory begins to form in his mind, a story of people dragged to that place against their will, perhaps like him, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. Fear grows within him, but the need to understand and perhaps find a way to avoid the same fate drives him to continue his investigation. He gathers the Polaroids, placing them in chronological order in an attempt to piece together the sequence of events. Each photo seems like a piece of a macabre puzzle, each face an untold story that ends in the carriage. The light from his cell phone reveals more details. Spots that he expected to be shadows or gaps in the photos are actually bloodstains, evidence of the violence each victim suffered. Louis feels a mixture of nausea and determination as he follows the trail of evidence. With each discovery, Louis feels he is delving deeper into not only the mystery of the boxcar, but also something personal and terribly dangerous. He makes a silent decision not to end up like the people in the photos. With a shaky breath, he prepares to explore the rest of the carriage, armed only with his flashlight and a growing sense that every moment is crucial. The fear of becoming another face in an abandoned Polaroid keeps him alert. While the wind outside seems to murmur words of warning, the sound of heavy footsteps begins to echo outside the carriage, slowly approaching. The twisted, rusted metal seems to vibrate with each approaching step, bringing with it a palpable sense of menace. Louis, frozen in place, holds his breath, trying to discern where the footsteps are coming from. They are deliberate and heavy, as if something or someone big produced them. Alongside the footsteps, a low, sinister laugh resonates. A laugh that promises nothing but pain. Completing the macabre chorus, a voice whispers through the darkness, so close that Louis can almost feel the cold breath that accompanies the words. "Why are you crying?" The voice is hoarse, almost a suppressed laugh, and he realizes that despite his terror, tears are beginning to run down his face. They are not of sadness, but of a primal fear. A fear he didn't know he was capable of feeling. He turns slowly, wide eyes trying to penetrate the darkness that now seems to close in around him. The footsteps continue, closer now, each resounding like silent thunder in the confines of the carriage. The laughter becomes more audible, a broken, horrifying sound that seems to mock his situation. Louis forces himself to move, logic telling him that staying still would be the end of him. He stumbles back, hands reaching for something to defend himself with anything. But the carriage is almost empty, except for the ghosts of the past that he cannot touch. As the source of the footsteps and voice approaches, Louis feels the air grow heavier, as if the carriage itself is preparing for what is to come. He presses his back against the cold wall of the carriage, his eyes frantically scanning the darkness for a shape or figure. The laugh grows, a mischievous sound that now seems to come from within him, echoing in his head. He closes his eyes for a moment, trying to control the panic that threatens to consume him, knowing that the only thing worse than seeing what's coming would be not seeing it and being caught off guard. When he opens his eyes again, he prepares to face whatever ghastly brings. In a panic, Louis tries to escape, running from carriage to carriage. Every door he tries to open resists his efforts, locked tightly as if it had never been opened. The windows, covered in dirt and grime, offer no view, only the reflection of his own terrified face against a backdrop of absolute darkness. The space around you seems to play with your perception, stretching out impossibly, each corridor longer than the last, each compartment more cramped and oppressive. The sound of Ghastly's footsteps still resonates behind him, getting closer and closer, relentless. Louis feels his heart beating in despair, each beat ringing in his ears with the urgency to flee, to escape the fate that seems increasingly inevitable. He struggles to breathe, the heavy, cold air burning his lungs as he continues his desperate escape through the endless carriages. The lighting is sparse, casting long, distorted shadows that move and contort as he passes, as if alive. Every shadow seems a threat, every distant sound a harbinger of unknown dangers. Louis stumbles over unseen obstacles on the ground, each fall a brutal reminder that there is no easy way out, no rescue waiting at the end of this railroad nightmare. In a moment of clarity, he tries to reason about his situation, trying to remember any detail he might have forgotten, any secret or forgotten passage that could be his salvation. But the truth is darker, more desperate. There is no escape. The carriage seems to feed on your fear, narrowing even more, the walls almost palpable in its claustrophobia. Exhausted and hopeless, Louis finally stops, his chest heaving with sobs of exhaustion and terror. He leans against the cold wall of the car, the metal cold against his sweaty skin. Closing his eyes, he tries to prepare himself for whatever comes next, knowing that escape was just an illusion in a maze carefully orchestrated by Ghastly. The distorted laughter echoes in his mind, a cruel reminder that perhaps, for some horrors, there is no escape. Louis reaches one last carriage, the end of his desperate escape. Inside, the environment changes drastically. The air seems heavier, filled with a metallic odor of blood and rust. In the center of the carriage, against a wall covered in a veil of darkness, is a large mirror. The surface of the mirror is uneven, stained with what in the dim light appears to be dried blood. Louis approaches warily, his heart beating so loudly he fears it might break the sepulchral silence. Looking at his reflection, Louis feels an icy shiver run down his spine. The reflection staring back at him doesn't follow his movements. Instead, he smiles, a wide, distorted, terribly sinister smile that is not reflected in his own face. The shock of seeing his image acting autonomously freezes Louis in place, his body unable to respond, his mind trying to process the impossibility of what his eyes see. In that moment of hesitation, a cold and heavy hand lands on his shoulder. The touch is so real and physical that Louis instinctively turns around, expecting to confront whoever is behind him. However, there is no one visible, just the sensation of icy fingers pressing against your skin. Fear turns to dread, and Louis notices that the reflection in the mirror is now moving independently, gesturing for him to come closer. Unable to control his own body, as if he were being pulled by strings, manipulated by his reflection, Louis finds himself walking towards the mirror. His reflection's smile widens even wider, filled with an evil that promises pain and terror. When Louis is close enough to touch the cold surface of the mirror, his reflection places his hand against his, the barrier between them looking like nothing more than a thin layer of fog. A desperate scream escapes Louis as he is pulled into the mirror, his voice lost in the wind that now howls louder through the empty carriages. Reflection replaces reality, sealing his fate in a twisted world where ghastly reigns supreme, and Louis becomes just another echo lost in the shadows of the wailing wagon.